Welcome, lovely one, to the Meant for More podcast. My name's Lisa Clifford, and I am building the world's most empowering Meant for More movement, leading millions of heart-led purpose seekers from feeling insignificant to invincible. So I truly hope you enjoy this next episode. And welcome to Simon Hartley, Be World Class. I met Simon at a tea party of all places through Claire Morley-Jones, a recent guest on this podcast. And I have since followed Simon and what he does in the world. And he is a sports psychologist. He's studied with elite athletes and teams around the world to capture what is the thinking mind, being, and actions of a world-class mindset, sports person, human. Simon is a sports psychologist, and he believes that it's not just sports people that can think this way. If a sports person can, then so can we. And he takes the patterns and the ways that sports people think and then helps other teams have elite performance through their mindset. I have to say, this is right up my street. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I know I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm so excited to have Simon here in the studio with us. Welcome, Simon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
An absolute pleasure. I'm delighted to be chatting with you.
Oh, well, in which case, we're going to do a few episodes together. Let's begin with the name of the podcast, which is Meant for More. And can you take us to a time in your life where you knew you were meant for more than where you were currently showing up?
Yeah, in fact, I shared it. I was speaking at a conference yesterday, and I shared.
As you do. I like that. Positioning early on.
It was unusual. Well, we're recording this on a Monday. I don't do many on a Sunday. Usually Sunday's a day for playing footy and being with the family. But yesterday we had a conference, and I was sharing with the audience that back in 2008-9, I was working in the Olympic programs, and I knew I was doing good work. The athletes I was working with were getting great results, and more than that, we were actually seeing them develop as people. And I'd also noticed people standing on stages, sharing their message with a wider audience. And I was thinking at the time, I'm sure I've got something that's worth sharing. And I could see, ironically, lots of the athletes that we worked with who'd gone on and picked up gold medals, then go on to stand on stages. And I'd seen lots of the entrepreneurs that I've been working with who built great businesses go and stand on stages and tell their stories. And I was thinking, I haven't got any medals, and I haven't got a multi-squillion pound business, but I'm sure I've got something that's worth sharing with a wider audience. And I shared that yesterday because when you're in that position, it's an idea. That's all it is. It's a thought. It's an idea. It's a little concept. And I wonder if ... And there's a process then that turns all of that into reality. And so I was sharing that little journey as part of my keynote yesterday. And yeah, that was a moment. That was a moment of thinking, I think this has more value. I want to get this to more people.
What was this? What was your message?
At that time, it was really about understanding and helping other people understand how they can engineer what goes on between their ears, as I describe it. And not most people's mindset. If you think about what people are thinking and feeling, a lot of the time it's dictated by whatever happens around them. Mm-hmm. If the wind's blowing in the right direction, they feel good, they're thinking good things, that they've got good emotions. But if the wind changes direction, all of a sudden their thoughts and emotions go with it. And I was thinking that, there's some real value to being able to take control over that stuff so that whichever way the wind's blowing, you can still think good things and feel good. So it was really about trying to help people understand how to take control.
Yeah, and be more conscious about what they are thinking and not think. So often you hear people say, well, it's the way I am, so I can't do anything about that. But actually, thank goodness that we can. And maybe those that say, I can't do anything about it are happy with how they are, and it's their sense of certainty. But we really can change how we think, and it starts with being conscious about it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and making choices. I think I've met lots of people over the years who will say that's just the way I am,
Mm.
without realizing that that's who they have become,
Yes.
and that if they didn't like it, and it's not an all or nothing thing. I mean, if you liked most of it, but there were bits that you wanted to improve on, you could.
Yeah.
You could. We're always evolving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's a big myth about I was born this way.
Mm.
Well, there are obviously certain elements or a part of us that's dictated by DNA. It's driven by our DNA, but our personality really isn't one of them. It's not fixed. It's fluid, and our character certainly and our identity, they're all fluid. They're constantly in evolution, and the question is, are we driving that evolution deliberately, or are we just letting it drift somewhere?
I have to ask a question. I'm sorry if I'm interrupting your flow. How would you describe the difference between personality and character?
A good question. To me, and if you read the research on this and read the sort of psychological definitions, they'll say that personality is the sort of mental differences between us, but that if we add the moral in there, that's where character differentiates.
So our values.
Yeah, and particularly not just having them, living them.
Yeah.
If I said I value honesty, but I don't always tell the truth, I'm not being an honest person. The character is being honest. And so that requires me to live the value, particularly when it's difficult. Particularly when there are moments, and if you take honesty as an example, there are moments when it's tougher to be honest, probably because by being honest, we look stupid or we make ourselves vulnerable or whatever it is,
Or we fear upsetting somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we wonder if they'd like what we're going to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So we often compromise our honesty. And so, yeah, it's that ability to live those values, particularly when it gets difficult, that becomes then part of our character. So I talk to people a lot about recruiting on character.
Mm-hmm.
They'll say, yeah, but we want diversity. Absolutely. You want diversity in lots of areas. And you definitely want people who think differently. You definitely want people who are sort of wired differently. And that normally operates at the level of personality.
Yeah.
But you probably want people who are rock solid on a few really critical values.
Yeah.
That is character.
Yeah. 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 How do you get people to work out what their values are? Not what they'd like them to be, but what they are. Because often if I'm working with people about their personal brand, the personal brand is what people say about them behind the back. And therefore, what would they like them to be saying and how close to those, that usually what they're describing is our values, and how close to those are they currently? But how do you get people to understand those rules that they're currently living by? Do you have a method? Without you, teaching us the stuff that you get paid for, but do.
Yeah, it's not that complex. It's really, I think, a case of narrowing it down and understanding which the most important ones are. And it's exactly the same process I use when I'm working with clients on how to recruit on character. If I say, tell me the characteristics that you need in people when you're recruiting, what defines a great person? The temptation is to list dozens of them.
Yeah.
Oh, we need people who are disciplined, who are dedicated, who are driven, who are honest, who have got integrity, and and honestly, they could reel off a list for like 20 minutes, half an hour, and you'd have hundreds on this list. Now, you're never going to find somebody who's got all of those things. So if I then said, okay, tell me the most important, you can only have one. So tell me the most important one. If you could only have one, which one would it be? And then they go, oh, that's a bit tougher. Yeah, it is. It's a lot tougher. Because what I'm going to suggest if we were recruiting on character is that we recruit according to 3 or maybe 4.
Mm-hmm.
5's probably too many.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were looking at ourselves, we'd say, yeah, we want to be an honest person. We want to have integrity. We want to be courageous. We want to be resilient. And we could go on forever.
Mm-hmm.
So the trick really is to understand which ones are really most important. And out of those, which ones do I need to start developing in myself? If I could only really develop one at a time, which one would I pick right now? And personally, I mean, I've been working on this for, I don't know, probably 10 years or so. I can remember tenacity many, many years ago. I used to give up on things. When it became a bit tough, I used to give up on it. And I knew that tenacity was an important characteristic. So for a good, probably year or so, 2 years, I really, really worked on tenacity. I can also remember probably in about in 2018, consistency was my characteristic of the year. Just after that, I noticed I was losing my rag, and so patience and tolerance in combination were the critical characteristics in about sort of 2019, 2020. And so they're always sort of revolving through, but I can't really properly focus on more than 1 or maybe 2. And if I want to get a proper step change in them, if I want to see a real difference, I need to give it probably a year, maybe 2 years of really working on those characteristics. And there were just things that I looked at in myself and I thought, I'd love to be a bit more X. I'd love to be a bit more tolerant, a bit more patient. And if I'm looking at myself in the mirror thinking, yeah, I really want to develop those in myself. I like myself more if I'm a more patient and tolerant person. So what would I have to do? And characters are really about how you respond in that really challenging moment, the moment when you're tempted to lose your rag. Because what most people do is they sort of lose their rag, they sort of regret it. Some then justify what they've done and then they don't shift.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't see it as, because I think the discomfort we feel in our behavior is our signpost to work on it. It's our little flag to say, if you're feeling uncomfortable with this is the thing you work on next.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can start doing that just one choice at a time. Whenever we hit that challenging moment, we challenge ourselves to make a different choice in that moment. And we don't always get it right, but it's like a little muscle that we start flexing. And as we flex it, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And over time, when we consistently make those different choices, we actually shape our character. We do become a more tolerant person or a more patient person or whatever it is that we're working on.
And I always think when we're challenged, it's when we've got the least bandwidth. And so we need to have that knowing in our bank already. I think it needs to be inserted in there already, that I know that in these situations I want to be more tolerant, rather than thinking that tolerance is going to arrive automatically, that it's something that's already placed in the timeline of if tolerance is one of the characteristics that we want to be more of. Unless we've pre-thought about it, it's unlikely to be available as an option when we're in that squished space of reaction, aren't we? So how do you work with people on getting them to place it in their awareness? Or maybe it's just, as you've said, a decision, because it can't be there, can it, if we've not already added it into the bank of options, or we can't expect it to be.
Yeah, I sort of life experience has taught me, particularly with when I reflect on myself, it usually comes through a process of reflection.
Yeah.
So I respond, maybe I don't respond the way I want to. I reflect on it, and if you think of it like a timeline, I've sort of got pre-response, immediately during response, and post-response. It starts post-response. You know, I reflect on it, I think back, maybe I didn't do it the way I wanted to. I can then sort of, when I'm coming to the next event in my life that might challenge me this way, I can try and intercept it sooner.
Yes.
And what that tends to mean is that I initially, I still do maybe respond a way that I'm not too pleased with, but the reflection comes quicker. And sometimes I catch myself almost in the moment. So I can remember when I was working on patience and tolerance, and particularly, the girls were a lot younger. We had a puppy around. If I had that moment, sometimes I would then loop back around. I can remember saying to my youngest daughter, "Listen, I'm really sorry. That wasn't the way I wanted to respond. I wasn't very patient then," and so I kind of caught it pretty soon. And then I can catch myself in the moment and change it. Then I can catch myself before the moment and see it coming and go, "Oh, hang on a minute, I know how I want to respond here." So it's just about kind of intercepting it earlier. But I also became aware that like you said, there are times when it's just tougher, like when you haven't got the bandwidth, when you're tired, when you're already stressed, And so when I think about like a staircase of challenges, responding the way I want to, when the wind's in my sails, it's a nice sunny day, I'm pretty calm, I've had lots of sleep, all of that sort of stuff. That's the lowest step on the staircase. The higher steps are when actually I probably am short on bandwidth, when things aren't really going well, when life's been chipping away at me, my energy's depleted. That's when actually that's a tougher challenge. That's towards the top of my staircase. But I get there by building solid steps. When I build solid steps, solidify them, build another step, solidify that one, another step, it becomes easier to get to the top steps. What I'm not going to sort of challenge myself or judge myself on is trying to leap to the top step and being perfect all the time in the harshest moments, because human beings don't tend to develop that way.
And it's about building in a little bit of consciousness in the moment of being reactive or in it, or in the immediacy of it, or the and quite often it can be when we think there's something that's going to be in danger that it pulls out our reaction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I know you've written a lot of books.
Yes, I have been scribbling for a few years. Yes.
You love sharing what you know, which I love. Out of all of you, which is your favorite book
Um,
that you've written?
favorite book. So I don't tend to read them back particularly. I can tell you, in fact, to the point where people quote bits out of my book and I go, "Really, did I write that?"
That sounds brilliant.
The one that's most popular and has had the greatest impact is a tiny little book that I never meant to publish in the first place, called Two Lengths of the Pool. And I wrote it initially because I was working with a client, and Two Lengths of the Pool is a really simple methodology. It's a methodology that's designed to help people simplify and clarify, to get past overwhelm and just to focus on the important stuff, cut out the distraction. And I'd used it initially with a swimmer, hence why it's called Two Lengths of the Pool. I'd used it with clients. I started with a law firm, and a few years on, I was working with a company in the automotive business. And I worked with the exec team, which I think was about a dozen people. We were talking about how we got it to everybody in the business, and at the time there were 1,500 people in their business. And I was aware, and so with the exec team, that if I told the exec team and the exec team told their first line and they told their next line, before we knew it, it was going to hit the Chinese whispers. And this two lengths of the pool concept would be radically different across the organization. So I said to them, I'll write it into a little book, and then we can give everybody a copy. Job done. Everybody gets it firsthand. And as I was doing it, I was thinking, I might as well put it up on Amazon whilst we're here. and it's the most popular book of the lot.
Really?
I've had books with publishers that have been on W.H. Smith's shelves, and when you get to the airport and railway station, and they're sort of like number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And I've walked into airport lounges and W.H. Smith's at railway stations and gone, oh hell, my book's number 3, number 2, whatever. But those books haven't sold as well as the little one I never meant to publish. So
how funny.
So that's the most popular. The one that challenged me the most, and I'm probably proudest of, is actually a fictional book called Silence Your Demons. Um, you know, well, we met at, what was it, a couple of years ago? You came
We
to
met,
Demon
well,
Charmers Live?
I met you before then at a tea party, which
Oh,
when
that's
I think
right.
now
Yeah,
is the least likely place I would imagine meeting, but I was through Claire Morley Jones.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
I went to, yes, your live event.
And so Demon Charmers Live was built around how do you sort of silence the demon in your head,
Mm,
and Silence Your Demons, the book, was written about how you silence the demons in your head. And I wrote it initially for teenagers, because my girls were experiencing life challenges, their friends were experiencing life challenges, and I was trying to find a way of helping them with their life challenges. And I thought initially, let's write a book. And then I thought a non-fiction book's going to be far too boring and nobody will read it. So if I could write it into a story, like a Harry Potter style story, but that conveys the principles of psychology and philosophy, then that hopefully might be helpful. So I wrote it into a story. It was like 80-ish thousand words. It was quite a big book. And to get it to a publishable quality, it took 12 full drafts and 7 years.
wow. At
And
which point they've left home, got jobs,
yeah, absolutely.
and
And
psychologists themselves.
the massive irony. So having now published it, put it out there into the world, people who are 40, 50, 60 years old are getting more benefit than 14, 15 and 16-year-olds. And actually, although I wrote it for teenagers, they're probably, I don't know, they're the smallest population of readers compared to people in their, latter years, 40, 50, 60-ish years old, who the feedback tends to be, I wish I'd had this book when I was younger, but of course the young folk are all invincible and they don't need it. So it's the older guys, those who've got a few grey hairs that seem to get more from it.
What do you think us older guys are experiencing that is causing us the most difficulty mentally? There's no doubt, is there, that
Mm-hmm.
that mental challenge, I'll call it, is on the increase, sadly.
Yeah.
What can you share about that, if anything, as to why or how, and then we can talk about what you think will be supportive for those people from your expertise.
Yeah. At the moment, I see pretty a level of challenge, a mental challenge for everybody. But it changes, the nature of it changes as we go through life. So I still see teenagers with massive angst. Theirs tends to be related to belonging and fitting in and being cool, because that is one of those mental challenges at that age. When you get into your 20s and 30s, surviving, keeping yourself, and if you've got a young family, keeping them alive creates all sorts of challenges. I see my parents and their age, their peers going through huge challenges, and I was reflecting with Caroline, my wife, as we were driving down to this conference yesterday about why older people get grumpy. Have they just fallen out of love with life? And I think there is a certain amount of relevant still at that age, feeling like you contribute to the world, you don't just exist within it. Not being able to do the stuff you used to do, losing your independence, all that sort of stuff. There are huge challenges with that. But at our time in life, I think there are a number of things that are evolving fast. I think we get known as the sandwich generation, don't we? Because our parents start to become dependent on us. Our kids still are, even though they're becoming more independent. But I think there are lots of physical changes that people go through, men and women slightly differently. But in my head, I can still do all of the stuff that I used to do when I was 20. The trouble is, I'm not, and I can't. But and that always comes as a frustration. Every time I hobble off the football field with yet another injury, having only spent 5 minutes back on the field after rehabbing the last injury,
You've no idea why.
yeah, I start cursing this old body of mine for not doing the stuff that I want it to do. And we do go through lots of those changes. I think lots of people at our time in life also hit so many plateaus. If you think about career development, for example, when you're in your 20s, you scuttle up that ladder. Every couple of years, you've got another promotion, another job, another challenge, another whatever. People in professional life, probably at our age, go 10 years without having that kind of career buzz that they used to have. And it'll be the same with, the growth curve of becoming a parent and all that sort of stuff starts to flatten off. But I think at the heart of it all is meaning and relevance and importance and feeling like you're of value and that you are valuable, that you make a proper contribution. For a lot of people, that's absolutely at the heart of what drives them. Having a sense of being important in the world, but also having a sense of doing exciting things. And I think though there are stages in your life when you get presented with more of those things, and stages of your life where you have to conjure them up yourself. You have to be in the driving seat and create them, because life's not going to drop them on your lap anymore. And I think this is one of those points in life where we have to be more conscious and deliberate about doing those things for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think when I think back to being in my 20s and 30s, so much of that drive and ambition was more about proving something to myself and something to someone else. That if I get promoted, then my dad will be proud of me. We didn't
Yeah,
even
yeah.
notice because he was self-obsessed. So, but I kept driving and driving, forgetting that was that was the thing that was pushing my bum up and up, that keep going, and it had become white noise, that driver of being on this career ladder so that my dad would be proud of me. And then there's that of we almost know, don't we, that we've got like a 10-15 year gap where we've got to go for it, and we do put so much energy into it. But I wonder, from your point of view, how much drive, how much ambition comes from somebody's own inner world, their own inner heart, or from that place of proving to someone else. Do you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
anything?
Well, I mean, I've seen both, and both can be massively powerful. I see it in athletes a lot. And there are some fairly famous stories, the likes of Tiger Woods, who was driven by that desire to prove to his dad that yes, he was worth it, and yes, he could do it, and wanted to make his dad proud and get the approval and all that sort of stuff. There
And
are
did he? And did he get his dad's approval, or did?
well, I mean, if you look at Tiger Woods' trajectory, I mean, he as a late teen and early 20 golfer, he was winning everything, and he was
Mm,
fueled by a massive desire, but I would say probably an unhealthy one. He would probably say an unhealthy one, and ultimately, I think that's not incredibly sustainable. And sometimes it's because that you come to a realization that maybe that's not what should be powering you, and you disengage with it, and actually your motivation deflates with it.
that's if
Um,
people have remembered. I
yeah,
wonder,
yeah,
I wonder how many people remember what got them on that path in the first place, and then they find themselves habitually and automatically going for something that they've forgotten why.
yeah. And I do think there are people who can't get to that moment of thinking, well, what's the point? What am I doing here? Why am I
Mm,
chasing this?
mm,
And whatever we're doing in life, I mean, I often reflect with athletes that actually what they do, when you think about it, is ridiculous. I mean, golf. really, we're dedicating our whole life to putting a little white ball into a hole in the ground, are we? Is that it? Cricketers, we're dedicating our whole life here to running around after a little white or red ball and hitting it with a piece of wood. Is that what we're doing? Um, and most activities, if you kind of dig under the surface, have got a level of ridiculous to them. Why would we want to be good? What's that all about? Why do we need to win? What's that all about? You know what? And I often go there with athletes because I'd like to get to a point where we've got an answer that's worth dedicating ourselves to. And not just because there's a medal at the end of it. Medal, so what? I can remember having a conversation with an athlete, and I said, "What's this all about?" He said, "Winning the gold medal." I said, "Is it really about a gold medal?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Fantastic. I'm going to pop down to the trophy shop and buy you a medal, and then we can stop all the nonsense." And he said, no, that's not it though, is it? I said, "So what is it really?" He said, "Oh, it's about being the best. It's about what the medal represents." I said, "Is it?" He said, "No." It's about being my best. And then he said, and this was the sort of light bulb moment, it's about being able to finish my career or finish today or finish this week, whatever, finish a competition and say, no regrets. That's really what it's all about. That's what I want to be able to do. Look back and say no regrets. And I wouldn't argue, but I'd offer people that thought and say, is that the same in your life? Is that really what we want? You know, when we closing out, when we're getting to those final days, whatever it is, or, I mean, I often reflect on my life and think, okay, so if I was walking along and I got struck literally by a bolt of lightning and that was me finished, you know, I'm just a smoking, crispy mass on the floor.
It's quite visual.
Would I be able to say, do you know what? I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
No regrets. You know, I lived a great life. I'm proud of what I did. I'm proud of more importantly, who I became.
Yeah.
Because for me, that's the real definition of pride, being proud of who you are, not what you've done.
Yeah.
Can I look back at now, if this is the end, and say, okay, cool, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah. And what's all of our barometers? I mean, you're a husband, you're a father, you're a son, you're a leader, you're an inspirer, you're an author. It's worth doing a little check, isn't it? I don't mean you. You're all over it. But what does having no regrets in all of those different experiences mean? Because then we can consciously, and then we've consciously got something that has that meaning for us.
Yeah, and you know, being realistic, we're never a finished article. We're always
Yeah.
a work in progress.
Well,
But
that's why we're
also,
alive, isn't it? Because when we're
yeah,
the
yeah,
finished article, then I think,
yeah.
we're
But
away.
this we're talking about, you know, this stage in life. To
Mm,
re-engage with all of that, I think, gives us real meaning,
mm,
purpose, gives us direction, something that's generated from within.
mhm,
It's not for anybody else. It's not
mm,
for anybody's approval. It's not
mm,
to tick a box. It's not to even pick up a medal.
mm,
Um, it's for us. And going back to something that you said earlier, one of the sort of philosophical schools of thought that I studied when I was coming through university was existentialism. And existentialism says that there are two things that always kind of operate together: freedom and responsibility.
mhm,
And it's actually scary. It sounds kind of utopian that we've got the freedom to live the life that we want to live.
mhm.
We really have. We've got the freedom to live the life we want to live, be who we want to be, you know, create the life that we want to live. But equally, we have the responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
And lots of people kind of forego both by saying, that's just who I am. That's the way I am. This is who I was born as. I was born into a family who dot dot dot. I could never be because my parents weren't X or Y. I was born in a council house, and you know, whatever. I wasn't given any privileges, and so actually, what we've done is thrown freedom and responsibility over our shoulder,
Mhm, mhm. And then
particularly the
lived
responsibility.
in this container of restriction based
Yeah,
on just thought.
yeah, the story that we want to wrap around it to kind of justify why we are the way we are, you're right, it becomes our little kind of self-imposed prison
Have
that
you
we
ever
choose to
witnessed
restrict.
have you ever witnessed somebody who's been so attached to their story, it's prevented them to grow into their potential?
Oh, yeah, I mean, loads of people do. Loads of people do. Because actually, if you think about it, it takes a lot of courage and a huge amount of honesty to be
Mm,
able to say, I'm the one that's been limiting
mm,
myself, that's limited my scope, that's created all of these boundaries for myself.
mm,
At the end of that session yesterday, I shared a little video, and in it, I've said, I know that I'm the only one that can restrict what I do, you know, and if there's something that I want to achieve, I'm the only one that can do it.
mm,
And the same is true for you.
mm, mm.
So, and that takes, it sounds easy, it sounds simple. It is simple, but it's not easy
Yeah.
because it does really take a bit of a deep dive into honesty and courage
Hmm.
to be able to get to a point of going, do you know what? I do have the freedom and I'm going to take responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've worked with, I mean, it's the work I do, which is bringing into consciousness what we want, but also what programming we have, what beliefs that we have that get in the way. And it's interesting hearing people break through those limiting beliefs, but keep the habitual language.
Mm.
And they don't realize they've kept the habitual language that then reinforces to the brain and so I do a lot of work in remember that you've got to stop that thought. Well, how do I stop the thought? You need to be awake.
Mm.
And I say this in quite a firm way, but you have to be the guardian of your thinking if you want to interrupt the habitual thoughts, the white noise that are operating your actions and your behaviors. You have to be consciously aware of them and stop them, intervene. And I don't know whether you have a method that you do with people to help them recognize there is, I think, I'm interested if you think of it here. I think there is no silver bullet with this. You have to be aware of your thoughts and be with them and pattern interrupt them and course correct them. But do you have a silver bullet that you do with people that stops those lifelong habitual thoughts still running even beyond what they consciously know to be true?
Yeah. So there are sort of levels to our mindset, quote unquote. Um, one of them is mental game, which is about understanding and starting to engineer the flow of thoughts and feelings that we have. The slightly deeper level is where character and identity sit. That's who we are and who we believe we are, and
Mm-hmm.
how we see ourselves. And this is where I mean I describe identity as the source from which the river of thoughts and feelings starts to flow. So, if I believe that I am a failure, and that everything I do is doomed to failure because that's who I am and I can't be successful, then the pattern of thoughts and perceptions and the way I perceive anything, the way I interpret what happens, the thoughts that I apply to it, the way that I'll limit my own imagination, all of that will be kind of governed by
Yeah.
that belief about myself, that element of my identity.
Yeah.
So, but understanding that our character and our identity in tandem can both be evolved. We can change those. We can sculpt and shape how those look. Over time, it's not easy. It's a journey, absolutely. But when we get to that place of thinking, okay, I'm a person who can, not a person who can't. And I'm not trying to believe that. I do believe that. That's now a central part of how I see myself. I am a person who can. When we get to that place, the flow of thoughts and feelings is different. We don't have to do as much interrupting because we've changed that. Now, we can kind of start at the level of interrupting them, absolutely. But if we wanted to, we could go and work on a slightly different level, and and then it's more about just feeling like I'm a person who can.
Yeah. And then that's how
So
you see the world, isn't it? I know I can, so therefore, what would I think? Yeah.
yeah, and naturally you just do start to think differently.
Hmm. Hmm.
But you have to fundamentally shift something down
Yeah.
there.
Start with that
That's
governing belief.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm. And I mentioned in your introduction about you working with people on a world class level, be world class. Can
yeah.
you just share how that came about and what being world class is and how you take it out in the world?
Yeah, sure. So it all started through my work as a sports psychology consultant and coach. And initially, I was only working with athletes. Um, part of my journey has been to follow my curiosity.
Hmm.
And when I was watching athletes at work, I would notice some who were consistently good, who were within 1 to 3% of their personal best, no matter whether there was a tidal wave, the wind was in the right direction, the wrong direction, whatever. Honestly didn't matter. They were consistently at their best. And others, of whom were really talented, were great one day and garbage the next.
Mm.
And so I started to wonder, what is it about these athletes that helps them become, within I call it peak performance every time, that sort of condition within their best almost every day. And I started to figure out there was a bit of a method to it. Um, I then started to ask the question, I wonder what differentiates the very best in the world. If I took world champions, not just athletes, world champions, world record holders, what would I find in all of those people? And I started studying. I found a dozen, one of whom was a mountaineer, another one was a polar explorer, one was a chef, one was a world barista champion, there was a scientist in there was an athlete, all sorts of different people. And I wanted to know, what are the common characteristics that I will find in all of them. And the reason to ask the question is, if there are characteristics that are common in everybody, those are probably really fundamental human characteristics that, if we were to all adopt them, would help us become great too.
Hmm.
So what are they? What are those principles, and how can I help people adopt them? My curiosity took me into people that are taken on ridiculous challenges. What is it about them that
Hmm.
allows them to do that? And my one of the fundamental things I learned about when I say extreme achievers, people who have, achieved things that most people would consider impossible,
Hmm.
and those who become world class, is that they all start off as ordinary people.
Hmm.
There's no special source that we can't all develop and access. They
They
didn't.
weren't born different.
No,
They
nothing in
didn't
their
have an
DNA.
advantage over us right from
No,
birth. Yeah.
and nobody snuck up on them with a vial of superhero serum and injected them. Nobody tapped them on the head with a magic wand. That none of that stuff happened. They all were ordinary people who became world class.
Mm.
So they went on a journey, a deliberate one normally, a tough
Mm.
one normally, but they went on a journey. I then started to ask, what would differentiate a world class team?
Mm.
So I studied a Formula One pit crew. I studied racing yacht crews. I studied Michelin star kitchens and surgical teams and special forces units and Red Arrows teams, all sorts, with the same question in mind. I, by default, started also studying world-class leaders, because when you find a world-class team, you tend to find world-class leaders.
Mm.
So I started to become interested in them. And that's how I've started to understand and learn about world-class environments, world-class performance. And my very simple mission now is to help other people adopt those principles and become great at whatever they do.
And so, what were the common characteristics of a world class person, and then team, and then leader, if I may ask?
So there are, I mean, I found when I looked at it, I found 8 characteristics of world-class individuals.
Mm.
But over time, what I've done is I've sort of simplified and tried to identify the core.
Yeah.
And the core of world-class individual performers. I used to start off describing it by saying they had a dream. It's not that. That doesn't differentiate people because we've all got dreams. I then thought it was a passion, but that's not it either because billions of people have got passions. But what they really, really do have is an insatiable curiosity. That's what doesn't just give it energy, it gives it direction as well. They're always asking questions, answering questions, and it's taking them down a path. And that those questions could be for a Michelin star chef. How do I cook ever more interesting, more challenging dishes, more delicious dishes? How do I create an incredible experience for my customers? What would we have to do? What would turn this dish into an even better dish? How do we elevate those very simple ingredients to something special? Those are the questions they're always asking. James, the world barista champion, was asking the same questions about how not just you make exceptional coffee, but how you serve it and create an experience around that that's exceptional, that's the best in the world. Mountaineers ask, how can they climb ever more challenging mountains? And it's not necessarily the higher ones, because many mountaineers will say Everest isn't like the pinnacle in their world. K2 is probably one of the toughest challenges. The north face of the Eiger is a really tough challenge. Those are the ones that really interest them. And how could you climb that in ever more challenging conditions? Those are the real tests. So they're always chasing these sorts of questions. That's at the heart of it, which interestingly is why the book that I'm finishing at the moment writing is called Follow Your Curiosity, because that's really what they're doing. That's at the heart of world-class performance.
And I just want to say with that, because quite often when I became a firewalking and empowerment instructor, I didn't know any. So it came from within my own curiosity of what can I do with people that helps them believe they can do anything their heart desires, that inner world stuff. Not that what should I be doing, what are other people doing, but and I thought, I could be a firewalking instructor. That would help them believe that. And so that idea came from within me. And so everything I do in my business is from that led curiosity and that whisper from my heart of how can I continuously improve? How can I take this from good to great? And so because it's I'm excited because you're affirming my own journey. And now there's firewalking instructors everywhere because they've seen, they do it, they're a coach, so I'll do it. And I was with my team saying I want us to operate at a world-class level. I don't want people just to be certified because they've shown up. I want them to have experiences that prove to them that they are working at an excellent level, that they've demonstrated it, that they've practiced it, that they understand it, that they're embodying it, and that they've worked through their stuff that gets in the way of them believing it. And then I see other people copying a bit of what I do, and I think, well, that's okay. At least they might be copying a level of excellence, I hope. But I am forever in that, and at the heart of every single firewalk, every single training is the student, the participant. Like, how do I unlock them? Not how do I do what I do better, but how do I unlock them? And so that's what keeps me staying true to my inner calling, my inner excellence, and my inner purpose.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt with such a gusto of affirmation.
But yeah, that kind of wondering is the start of it. Once we grab hold of that and honor that wondering, and actually, kind of wrap some questions around it that we've got to be hungry to find the answers, not because we think we should, but because we want to.
Yeah.
That takes us on a journey. That's the journey that I see lots of world-class performers go on. And it's, like I said, it's not an easy journey. When we're asking the right kinds of questions, they're really challenging.
And it can
And
feel alone as well, can't it? Because it's almost a solo journey because it's an inner world journey. It's not, well, what do you think? Oh, yeah, well, I'll think the same. It's not duplicating somebody else's thoughts. It's that inner discovery, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think the nice thing about these journeys, because we operate in a world where other people are on their own journeys, at some point in time we kind of bump into somebody else that's got a similar question, and then their curiosity might take them off in a different direction. So does ours, but we tend to bump into other people who have got that next question as
Mm,
well.
mm,
So yeah, we weave a different path than they do, but because we're all pretty much shoulder to shoulder in this world these days,
yeah.
we end up knocking into somebody and being able to share something. And honestly, I think the process of sharing what we found, sharing what we think, sharing a theory, an idea, being able to say to people, "What do you reckon?" It really helps because it just keeps fueling that fire.
Mm. And what did you find, excuse me, was the characteristics of team players winning as a team?
So they tend to have a trio. Teams that operate at a world class level are all aligned, empowered, and engaged. Now, I share this with business leaders all the time. And as I share it, I say, these are not new words.
Hmm.
You will use them all the time. You'll hear them
Hmm.
all the time. I suspect they'll be built into your values already. You'll be talking about, your leadership programs will all be about how you engage and empower people. You'll be talking in board meetings about how you need to align everybody. These are not new words, but they are incredibly rare qualities.
Yeah.
Particularly, they're rare together as a trio.
Hmm.
Not just one or two of those, but all three together all of the time. That's rare. That's why when you get them together, you find a world class team.
And just share what empowered looks like within a team. Because I hear leaders often say, well, they're empowered, but that means that they've got authority to a point.
Mm.
And what does it need to be for team performance? What does empowered need to mean there?
Well, if you look at the definition of the word empowered, it means they have the power to.
Mm,
So, have they actually got the power to? Would
mm,
be my question. What have they got the power to do?
mhm,
Um, when I see teams who are great and who genuinely are empowered, they are collectively solving problems.
mhm,
They're not being given the answer.
mhm,
Usually, I find that the leaders don't provide many answers, but they ask great questions and they give people the space to answer them. That usually is an outward sign that we have an empowered team. And when I talk to leaders about what I call the benchmark of empowerment, it's the point where both parties are confident that the leader is not required anymore. So, for a decision, for example, the leader is confident the person can make it without them, and the person's confident they don't need the leader. When we've
That's a
got to that,
journey, isn't it?
oh yeah,
It-
absolutely,
It's like the stairs, I think.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
and it will not happen all in one go.
mm,
When I think about last couple of years, I've been learning to fly.
you mean in a
When,
plane or
in a little plane,
yeah,
yes, yeah,
yeah.
with one little propeller at the front, and when I first sat in the left-hand seat of the aeroplane, the instructor was sitting next to me. My first lesson, I thought to myself, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to fly this thing on my own. That's a ridiculous thought. Who would ever let me loose in an aeroplane on my own? It's just a completely bonkers concept. Less than 20 flying hours later, I did my first solo.
Wow.
And as I took off, I'm thinking, how on earth did we get here?
Yeah,
This is crazy.
amazing.
But what the instructor had done is handed me a little piece of empowerment, followed by another little piece of empowerment, followed by another little piece, got to the point where we were both confident that I could fly the plane without him. And that when he said, okay, we're going to land in a minute, I'm going to jump out and then you're going to take off and fly off on your own. Are you okay with that? The most idiotic word came out of my mouth. Yeah. I said, and as I said yes, I thought, you idiot, what are you doing?
Just said yes.
Yeah. But at the same time, I thought, yeah, I am. I'm okay. I'm
Yeah,
good. I can
yeah.
do this. No
I
problem.
I do that on my instructor training course is because it's all about teaching empowerment, and so I do the same. I bit by bit by bit they prove to themselves they can do it. And I love that about your journey with flying, where you find yourself saying yes, and you just think, hang on a minute, I've not thought this through. Because
Mm.
if we let the logical mind take over, it will. Well, what will it do if we let the logic? Because I think you unconsciously answered that, because your unconscious was like, yeah, I've learned, I've got this. But what would the conscious mind do given space?
Well, interestingly, the conscious mind, my conscious mind, then kind of went, "Oh yeah, hang on a minute, you've," and interestingly, the phrase that the instructor shared just before we came in and landed, he said, "I've just been a passenger." Just have a think back. The last few flights that we've done, last few circuits we've flown, I haven't done a damn thing. You've done everything. I have literally just been sitting here as a passenger. So if I hop out and you fly off, are you okay with that? And as I was thinking, oh yeah, and I've done bad weather circuits. We've had birds on the approach because this is an international airport. We've had big airliners coming in. I've dealt with all of that stuff. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can do this. So consciously, unconsciously, I sort of aligned on both, because both the rational and emotional part of me went, okay, yeah. I mean, it's a challenge, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It's meant to be a challenge. It's meant to stretch you. And if you don't have a little tickle of adrenaline and a few nerves, there's probably something wrong.
Yeah, you're not being conscious enough. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, okay, cool. But no, I'm ready.
Mm. And then, in terms of leaders, then, what was the common characteristic in world-class leaders?
Well, they are able to align, empower, and engage their teams.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the bit that they have to do consciously.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that their teams really are genuinely aligned. They are empowered and they are fully engaged in what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of ways that they do it, and I don't think there's one formula. People talk about authentic leadership, which basically means we're not all robots. We're not looking for leaders who are robots. We're looking for people to be themselves, but they really genuinely need to bring that with them.
Mm-hmm.
And when they do it, they operate from a place that says, this is not about me, it's about you.
Mm-hmm.
My job here is to make sure you can deliver your best individually and collectively.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can do that, I'm doing my job properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes quite selfless.
Mm-hmm.
I heard I was working with GE, who a massive global corporate, and they were talking about Jack Welch, who was the sort of founder and CEO of GE. He would say to leaders as they were coming through, "This isn't about you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to judge you as a leader. I'm not going to judge you purely on your own performance. I'm going to look at your team, and if your team and your people are performing well, I think you're doing a great job."
Yeah.
And that's the bit that great leaders kind of properly embrace.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to be in the spotlight. They don't need to be grabbing the headlines. They're not particularly interested. One of the things that, and this is just a sort of an expression of that. When I look at great sports coaches, they've usually got the habit of saying, if the teams perform really well, it's all about the players.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was working with a cricket club with a really, really great cricket coach who'd been an international player himself. And whenever the team performed really well, he would say to the press, "Listen, don't talk to me and think it was my doing, because I didn't carry the bat out there. I didn't bowl any balls. I didn't catch any balls. I didn't throw any balls. I didn't hit any balls. I didn't do any of that stuff. That's all the players." And if we'd lost, he'd say, "That's on me, because I need to prepare them properly."
Yeah, yeah. And the thing about that methodology, as well as it being true, is when the team know it was all about them, then they can duplicate that. But if the celebration or the accolade belongs with the leader, then that's not something the team can duplicate over and over and over again. As well. So it becomes disempowering when you take the credit or even any of the shine for your team's performance, because what you've just done there is said that it wasn't about them, so you can't get them to duplicate it.
Yeah.
What's the one behavior trait that undermines a team performance that is an unintended behavior trait that leaders often have without it being intentional, but it's the thing that will get in the way of their team's performance more than anything else?
Yeah, there's probably more than one, but one of the ones that I see often is blame. They blame. So in business, they blame the economy because the economy or the market's taken a dive or something like that, or they blame the fact that there are some new regulations, or in sport, they blame the referee for making a bad decision or whatever. And talking about disempowering, that absolutely disempowers everybody. Because whilst it's the economy's fault or the government's fault or the referee's fault, we can't do anything about it.
Exactly. There's no growth happening. There's no solution happening. There's no
Mm.
responsibility.
And so leaders, without realizing it, often throw out a kind of throwaway line.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was because the referee made a bad decision. Or, yeah, well, if the government hadn't decided to do X, Y, or Z, or, oh, well, if President Trump hadn't decided to do X, Y, or Z, then,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, well, we know that stuff's happening. But it was, I once heard a swimmer and a coach having a conversation, and the swimmer hadn't performed very well. He climbed out of the pool, and the coach said, "So what happened today then?" And the swimmer said, "Oh, well, the pool was cold." And the coach's response, like that, he said, "What, just in your lane?" And this is the perspective. Yeah, everybody's got stuff going on. Governments make decisions that affects everybody. The market takes a dive that affects everybody in the market. President Trump decides to bomb another country. That there's ramifications for all of us in there. The question is, what are we doing about it? How do we respond? How good was our plan? How well did we go and execute it? Did we adjust the plan when we needed to? Those are the things that we can start to control. So let's dive back into that.
Oh, Simon, I've loved our conversation. I've had all on not chipping in all the time. And I did do a fair amount of chipping in. I've so loved it. In closing, then, if you had one sentence to share with the world, just one, what would it be? What is it going to be?
So it's a piece of advice I was given. And I think it's probably the best piece of advice I was given ever. Take your own advice. I think we tend to have the answers.
We do.
If we applied that onto ourselves, we'd
Yeah.
probably be brilliant.
Yeah, and I love that because I always say if we're not following our own advice, then our brain will find someone to aim it at, so we hear it coming out of our mouth, and then we think, oh, actually, that's interesting. I should follow that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we disarm and debunk most of our challenges in life if we did take our own advice.
Take your own advice. And I think for anybody listening today, depending on how early it is, but what advice have you just given someone that if you thought about it for yourself, where would it fit for your own life that would benefit you? I love that. Oh, Simon, thank you so much. I've absolutely loved this. Would you come back? This is like asking, can my friend come for tea in front of mine? Asking you on air means I'm definitely going to get a yes.
You would have got one anyway, but yes.
Thank you so much. I massively appreciate all this wisdom. I can't wait to watch it all the way through again. Thank you, Simon.
Absolute pleasure.